Hello, everyone. I'm Janine Wolf, your host of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I wanted to let you know that I'm taking a break for a few weeks, and episodes will be resuming on September 26th. I'm lining up some new speakers, have some new exciting things to share with you in this upcoming season, and I also will be resuming my fictionalized case consultation groups where we discuss fictionalized cases in a consultation group format. If you're interested in participating in those, please check the show notes for the link to subscribe. I'm looking forward to all the exciting things I have planned for you, and I appreciate your loyal listenership. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. Welcome back. Today, I'll present a live fictionalized case consultation with a group of therapists. Listen in as we look at various aspects of the case along with treatment recommendations, areas of concern, and ways to look at those gray areas we so often encounter in our field. So the way I typically work with my cases is that I usually am the facilitator, and we have therapists that will take turns presenting cases, and then everyone will sort of jump in on the cases, and I will do that as well. What I struggled with when setting this up was I have come up with the fictionalized cases, but if I present the case as the therapist, then you're going to miss the piece of some of my side of the work that I do that I think is helpful to understand as a group member. So for that reason, I'm going to ask if someone will be a volunteer therapist. I will read the case. And if somebody will volunteer to say, okay, I'm going to own this as my case, most likely is going to be a nuance that you've heard of before or experienced yourself, and you get free license. I'm going to read the case, and if someone asks you a question, it's your client now. You get to say, yes, I've tried that, or no, I haven't tried that, and you get free license to do that. So do I have any brave volunteers that will be the therapist for our case? Lisa. Thank you. Okay. Whew. It's like, what do I do if no one volunteers? Okay. All right. So if everyone's ready, if everyone who's here that's participating in the case consultation, if you could please turn on your camera. If you're not able to do that, I understand, but I would ask that you leave the session and follow up with a recording, because as I said, I want this to be as authentic as possible, and it's not comfortable for people to be presenting a case if they don't know who's behind the camera. Okay, here we go. So Jane is a 30-year-old female. She began treatment to address issues at her job, which are creating a lot of stress for her. She often feels dismissed and ignored. Then there's Julie, who is a 50-year-old female. She's been married for 32 years. She is unhappy in her marriage and states that she and her husband have not been happy for a long time, and she's considering asking for a separation. The therapist started seeing both clients within weeks of each other. After having worked with them over the course of 5 or 6 months, the therapist is starting to believe they may be related in some way, possibly mother and daughter. Neither of them have disclosed this. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Lisa about this case? Any clarifying questions or anything that they would want to know more details about that she's going to make up for us? Okay, so let's just start this out. So typically what would happen is we would just sort of jump in and say, oh my gosh, I see why this is hard for you. Like, this is tricky. I've had this happen before, or yeah, these are the gray areas that can be difficult. And some people don't see gray areas in these things. And if that's you, that's fine. I feel like there's a lot of nuances of our work that aren't black and white. So let's just open it up with what factors are the most relevant or concerning right now about this case. And please open your mics. I want this to be collaborative. What comes to mind? Like, what questions do you have? What do you immediately say? Oh, I see why you presented this case, because this is the problem.
Can I talk? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. The first thing I just noticed is that wouldn't that information be in the biopsychosocial? Because both clients would have a biopsychosocial, and just based on the names, it may say, because my biopsychosocial will have your children, and just to clarify the point that if they're related or not. So has this information been on the biopsychosocial?
So no, my biopsychosocial does not involve the names of the family members.
And also,
but that's a good idea.
Yeah, but for people filling out their intake paperwork, if you have a mother and daughter, they could have different last names. And if you had clients who were intentionally wanting to both see you and think that you wouldn't see them both, then they might disguise some information. So I actually do a genogram and I ask for names, but not necessarily. Usually the people that are in their immediate circle, I want to get those names so I know them, I can reference them. But so I think it's a really great point, Marlo. And there are ways that that can be discovered, but I think there are sometimes nuances where that may not be so readily apparent. And please, everyone, please go ahead and unmute. You don't need to be called on. We typically just open your mic and start talking if you have a question or feedback or insight.
I guess my question would be like, what came up that's concerning you about it? Like, are you hearing like two sides of a very familiar story, or like, where do you think that would be my first step, is like, what's coming up that feels like you'd want to tread carefully? Or you're afraid you're going to talk about one person and that's actually, I don't know, just like, what's the concern? Like, what's pushing the red flags?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So, I work throughout my state, and I noticed they're both live in the same smallish town. Additionally, a lot of the issues that Julie expresses about her husband, I've heard similar issues from Jane about her father. She did happen to mention that there have been some recent issues between her parents, not that that necessarily relates to the issues she's got with her job. And Julie did mention her daughter does work in a field similar to Jane. She just spoke in generalities, so there were no specifics. I'm not sure.
Another question I may have is just, even though you may feel that they may be related on some sort, is it actually relevant in the fact that your treatment or your modalities used is going to affect them in a negative way? I mean, because you're with your client, you're with her and the daughter separately, talking about separate issues, focusing on it being client centered. So what's the true relevance of knowing if they're related or not?
Yeah, Marlo, I thought about that because neither one is coming to me with problems about the other. So they're very separate. And so I'm wondering if it even is a problem. But I was curious about what other people's feedback would be, because I'm a little afraid of doing something unethical. I wonder too, if maybe if I do come to some understanding that I really, really believe that they must be related, what if I slip up and I say something like about the separation to Jane, or act like I know something that I shouldn't know, according to her?
I think that is very self-actualization, awareness for yourself. I mean, just the simple fact that you're even thinking about that, you're cognizant of it, and it will probably highly likely that you won't, say something about that because you're actually thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate hearing that. That's helpful.
This would be more of a general question, and instead of because we tend to do that in the group too, is like, what would be the things to look out for? Like, what are the concerns, like the actual legal ethical concerns? Because I think sometimes, I know myself, I can just get very, oh no, they're a friend, I can't. But is that actually the case, or am I just trying to create these boundaries, these really hard lines where they maybe don't need to be? Because I'm not sure I'm really well versed on what actually would be the legal ethical gray area that you would want to very much stay away from or work with or be careful of. So I don't know.
Yeah, that resonates with me, Michelle, because I'm a rule follower and I don't want to get in trouble for anything.
Yeah. Well, and if I feel like if I know, that's my framework thing. I feel like if I know, hey, here's where it can become an issue, here where it could be a real ethical problem, here's where you could run into these issues in breaking trust with your client, then I'm much more aware of being able to tell if that's actually an issue. And if I start to bump up against it, I'm cognizant of it instead of being sideswiped. So
yeah, I'm wondering now, would it be appropriate for me to ask some clarifying questions of either of my clients? I mean, I would be kind of concerned that they'd wonder why are you asking the name of my daughter or my mom? But if I did that, then I could be more clear on, hopefully get more information so that I know what I'm dealing with. I don't know.
So has anyone here experienced something like this?
I have.
I have.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Okay. So without discussing your specific case, what were the factors that were concerning for you or that made it okay for you to say, yes, I can keep seeing both of these people? I know Kim, who else spoke? Kim spoke and
I
Ann.
did.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Kim, will you go first and then we'll have Ann?
Well, for me, I realized she was talking about a family member and sharing details. So I just said, this sounds really familiar. It sounds like, so and so. And I just want to let you know that I mean, identifying that this is probably somebody I'm related to. And I just want to talk it out a little bit to see, how do you feel about that? We just processed it together. And of course, I assured her everything's confidential and all of that. But it was a distant relative that I didn't see a lot. But that's how I handled it. I just said, wait a second, I'm really identifying with who you're talking about. I think I know the story. So that's how
So
I
this
handled it.
was a distant relative of yours.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That
So
she was
that's
working
another
with.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of a sudden, she was telling me this horrific story. I didn't even know it. That it was happening to my family member, but I was like, oh my God, this sounds really like somebody I know.
Mhm.
So that's how I handled it. I was like, let's stop right here. I just need to let you know that
Mhm.
I think I might know who you're talking about. So, we
Okay.
just processed it and all of that.
Okay,
That's how I
good.
handled it. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to go to Ann next, but I think it is really valid. I think Marlo said this earlier that it doesn't always need to be a problem, but having an awareness so we can make that decision is really important. Okay. And being able to say, oh, I didn't realize this. Now, what am I going to do about it? And if it's okay, because what I see in a lot of Facebook groups when they're discussing cases is this black or white, you absolutely have to refer that person out. And I just don't feel like it's that simplistic. And so it's the nuances of our work that we really need to look at. So Ann, you said you have had a similar circumstance.
And mine was similar to Kim's where, well, actually I've had a distant relative come to therapy and it turns out I was related to them. I didn't know that when they came into therapy. And then I've also had friends, like a friend would refer another friend and I didn't know that they were friends. And so, and then somehow it would come up and they were really close friends. And so, I think that getting really clear, on what for the relative, I handled it similarly to what Kim said. And then for the friends, I try to, like what Marlo said about being aware of myself and what is this? Am I anxious about this? Am I hearing what I need to be hearing, from the clients? Or I'm getting in my own way with regard to this. And I think too, what popped into my head was, this is exactly the kind of case that you would not take to a Facebook group because you would get eaten alive, because we come out of school thinking it's this, and this. And, we have these rigid, parameters. And then as it turns out, you get into the real world, you practice in a small town, whatever, and these things come up all the time. And so like I said, I think part of it is just getting really clear about how it's affecting how I'm interacting with them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Am I getting in my way?
Right. Yeah. So Lisa, I want to figure out how we can best support you around this. Are you feeling the need for your own experience to clarify this so that you can set those parameters or have peace of mind that they're not related?
I guess I just really was looking at feedback in general, and it's been really helpful to kind of hear your guys' thoughts. I think more than anything, it just kind of, I got a thought in my head and a worry, and it started getting out of control. And I feel like you guys have kind of brought me back to reality and helped me really look at this again. I don't know that I really feel the need to know anything for sure, not at this point. I can keep it in the back of my mind. And if it gets any more complicated, I can bring it back to you guys for more
100%.
feedback.
Yeah, 100%.